finally going to start getting into what a former officer of mine used to refer to as the meat and potatoes of the training. So if you're vegan, you may want to look away. All joking aside though, in this video, I'm going to take you through the three main options for establishing an anchor when exiting out a window as well as off the roof. Now since exiting out a window is the most likely location that you can deploy BRS, that's where we're going to start. When we break them down, option number one is attaching to a substantial object. Now you get a lot of choices there, but in short, what it involves is attaching to something that's going to easily support your body weight. We're going to talk about doing that both remotely or away from your exit, as well as right next to it. The second main option is using a tool. Now you actually can break that down into three additional techniques. Number one, placing your tool right at the sill plate to span the entire width of the window. Method two is placing the tool in the corner of the window. And the third technique is a tool in the wall. What method you use is going to be based on three factors: the construction of the wall and window framework, the width of the window, and the type of tool that you have with you. Now your last main option is using your hook as an anchor. This is implemented when you don't have a substantial object to attach to, you don't have a tool with you, and or seconds literally count. At that point, this becomes your last ditch anchor and you're going to load your system off of it. Just like the tool, we have three methods for placement. Number one, you're placing the hook flat. Two is on a 45, and three is perpendicular or vertical. What method of position you use is going to be based on the construction of the wall and window framework. So let's take a closer look at all three of those main options. Take the hook, go around the object, create a biter rope, insert it through the hitching slot, capture the point, tension off the rope going back to your pocket. Depending on the size or circumference of the object that you're attaching to, you're probably going to have to play rope out. Remember, there's only a short section coming off the base of the flash to the top of the F4 when you're initially deploying your system. Now, to extend rope out, you need to squeeze the release lever flush or tight to the side of the F4. This is really important. Avoid putting that death grip on the device. If you do that, you're putting pressure on these sections of rope that are coming through the holes of the F4. That's going to create a lot of friction, making it extremely difficult for you to extend or play rope out. Here's how you want to hold the device. You're going to take your thumb or fingers and squeeze the lever, and then put your thumb or fingers on the opposite side with an open palm, so there's no pressure on the ropes that are coming through the side of the device. To extend rope out, you're going to push the flash away from your body and pull the F4 toward yourself. Pull out enough rope that you can easily wrap around the object that you're going to be attaching to. A good rule of thumb is to maintain reference or line of sight with your exit as you're establishing your anchor. Remember, conditions can change, so periodically look over your shoulder. Once your anchor is established, my recommendation is you face it as you advance toward it. If you move backwards, there's a possibility that you might fade to your right or fade to your left. That could put you 5 to 7 feet off, and in bad visibility, that could make a huge difference. When I face toward it, I want to orientate the F4 and keep it on my right side. That's the same side that the rope is coming out of my pocket, so it's going to play out a lot easier. Remember, at all costs, avoid the death grip on the F4. Keep that open palm as you start moving. Now the last step, after you attach to a substantial object and made your way to the window, is to make sure you've got proper DCB clearance. Regardless of whether you have an integrated or independent system, if you remote anchor, you're going to be pre-attached. So when I get to the window, I want to draw the DCB out over, and I want a minimum of 6 inches of clearance. I never want my body to draw the device out over the sill, or there's a potential of it getting hung up. Same thing, avoid that death grip. Make sure you got your clearance, and then you can go ahead and bail. Again, I'm going to show you those techniques in the next video when we get into actual bailout. Now that we covered remote anchoring, I want to talk about establishing an anchor right by your exit. Now, regardless of whether you're attaching to a substantial object, using a tool, or using your hook, there are three distinct advantages of establishing an anchor right by your exit. Number one is there's a lot less likely of a chance of you getting lost or disorientated because you're right by your exit. Conversely, if you're establishing an anchor remotely, 10, 15 feet away, you could get lost in the smoke that you're moving toward. Number two reason is that you're going to be minimizing the amount of rope exposed to any heat or fire if that room would become fully involved. Because you're not stretching 10 to 15 feet away, you're in close proximity to the window, there's a smaller section of rope that's going to be exposed. And along those same lines, number three, you're going to be maximizing the length of your rappel because there's just a short distance, you're using only a short amount of rope from your anchor to your exit. So you have more rope to reach the ground, which can be important if you're deploying your system from a greater height. Now, one of the easiest substantial objects to secure to right by the window is to look for an L or partition wall right off the side of the window frame. In that case, what you're going to do is you're going to take a tool, breach the wall, and then you're simply just going to wrap a stud. If your system is independent, you don't have to connect up to your harness or belt before you establish the anchor and get DCD clearance. You can hook to your anchor, get proper clearance, and then hook up to your belt. And in some respects that can be an advantage because instead of me just pulling the F4 toward my body and extending the flash out, I have a greater span, so I can actually start to separate my arms and get more extension or more rope out. Now, as I move up to the window, I'm going to draw the DCD out, get my proper clearance, and then go ahead and hook up to my escape belt, or in this case, seat harness. And then you're ready to bail. The next main option for establishing an anchor is the use of a tool. Now, I often get asked, why would you use a tool if you have an anchor hook in your system? Well, the answer to that is quite simple. Most anchor hooks have a single point of contact, versus a tool has a lot more surface area and multiple points of contact. So if you have the time, it can be a safer platform to load your system on. I like to look at the hook as a last-ditch anchor. It's deployed when you're out of options and you're out of time. Now, if you remember at the start of the video, I talked about the three main methods for using your tool to establish an anchor. Number one is placing it at the sill plate to span the entire window width. Number two was putting it in the corner of the window opening. Number three was a tool in the wall technique. If all I have is a flathead, picket axe, or one of the new age tools like a pig, I'm not going to use them to perform method one or method two. These tools are extremely unbalanced. All the weight is at the working end, so there's just too great of a chance for them to rotate and fall out of position. If I can't perform the tool in the wall technique, really at that point, I'm going to go to my anchor hook. The two best tools for method one and method two are the Halligan type bar and the 6-foot metal hook. Both of those tools are extremely well balanced and hold their positions quite well. Now in the end, regardless of what tool you use, what method you implement, the technique for attaching the hook and anchor under your system is going to be exactly the same. You're going to extend out about 2 feet of rope, create a bite, place it through the hitching slot, and then you're going to insert the fork end of a Halligan bar, the end of the 6-foot hook, or the handle of the axe through that loop. The last method I want to discuss is a tool in the wall anchor. Now, this is a technique that I actually invented in the latter 1990s, long before anchor hooks ever came out on the market. Since then, we've deployed it hundreds and hundreds of times on an extensive amount of acquired structures. And all I can tell you is that when it works, it is insanely strong. We've actually had 3 to 4 firefighters hang from a rope and not pull the tool out of position. However, there are factors and components that you need to be aware of for this to be implemented. Unfortunately, there's too many of them for me to cover them all in this video. But some of the highlights. First, you need to have a full cavity or stud space with no obstructions in the wall. You can't have any pipe, any wires, any conduit, any fire stops. You got to be able to insert the tool and the handle or shaft deep into the wall for this to be effective. However, if the construction elements allow it and it works, I would almost consider it a bomb-proof anchor. That being said though, really, I think for most people to feel confident in it themselves, you're going to have to practice this technique on acquired structures. I tell you though, once you do and you see how effective it is, you're going to keep it in your arsenal, in your toolbox for sure. At this point, I just want to take you through really now the methods for deploying this technique. First of all, it can be used with any tool. When I'm using a Halligan bar, I want to make that bite, insert the handle through. I want the bevel side of the fork up and the blade of the adze down. Your first step is to come in perpendicular to the wall. And you're going to push hard and you're going to breach the sheet into the wall. That's step one. Step two is to push the tool up parallel to the wall. That's going to fracture the sheeting above the breech. Now you notice how the hook is on the outside. By breaching that sheeting above the breech, it's going to allow you to pull the tool down deep in the wall. It's going to get the tool more parallel to the wall. So you have the tool down as deep as you can. This is where all the integrity of the tool is. If you do a cutout, there's no pressure on the wall here at all. All the pressure now is on the exterior wall. So you could not even have any wall here and this tool would still hold in place. Just like all the other methods, you want to make sure that you got proper DCD clearance. If not, you're going to extend out to make sure you got about 6 inches of clearance for your DCD. Then you go ahead and exit. You're going to use the same technique with the axe that you did with the Halligan bar. It's just that you want to face the blade away from the window opening. In this position, the blade extends past the sidewall of the window frame. It can act as a knife and possibly sever your rope as you're bailing out. If you remember at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that there's 3 different methods for positioning your flash hook as an anchor when exiting from a window. The first method was laying the hook flat. The second was at a 45-degree angle. And the third was perpendicular or vertical, which works best for a projected sill. Now, a lot of instructors teach that technique almost exclusively. And even though it's effective, I gotta tell you, I'm not a big fan of it for basically 3 reasons. Number one, you gotta take into account how is the sill plate constructed. If it's constructed well, it's going to actually project underneath the decorative 1x framework on the side. So it's going to go underneath it, which gives us some more stability. If it's constructed more cheaply, it's going to terminate right here. Right, it's going to butt up just to the edge of it. So it means it's going to be easier to pull out of position. The number 2 factor you need to consider is what is it constructed of? What type of material? This one, I don't know if it's a composite or plastic, but this whole section right here blew out, cracked off. It actually used to project all the way to here, and it failed. So that's something to consider. And lastly, what is the condition of the sill itself? Is it rotten from water seeping through or leaking through the window, and now it's lost all integrity? All 3 of those factors, how it's constructed, what it's made of, and what its condition is going to be impossible to determine under active fire conditions when all you're thinking about is getting out. So if you put over-reliance on this projected sill, thinking that it's going to hold your hook, and it fails, that hook's going to come out instantaneously, and it's unrecoverable. Myself, I prefer laying the hook flat. You get a lot of overlap. It seems to hold in place on a lot of different types and configurations of framework, but in the end, you do have to be comfortable and proficient in all 3 methods of positioning. When I'm using the flat method for positioning the flash, I'm going to put the hook deep into the corner of the window frame, laying it flat and level with the sill plate. My hand's going to start by cupping the hook, and then as I move out, my hand's going to go into this orientation, where my thumb is in line with the spine of the hook, and then my index finger is holding that flange. That's going to keep the hook flat and deep into that corner. Position it, give it a hit to set the point. Start with that cup technique, draw your DCD over the sill, let your hand slide so your thumb is in line with the spine and your index is on that flange of the hitching slot. Now we're going to look at options to secure your system for emergency egress off a pitched roof. If time is critical, you can hook the flash right on the rung of the roof ladder. However, the preferred method is to wrap the hook completely around the rung. And just like when attaching to a substantial object, you're going to create a bite in the rope, pass it through the hitching slot, capture the point, tension off the rope, and then slide the flash to the side you're going to exit from. Whether you're on a roof ladder or not, you can use your tool to breach the roof deck. This creates a purchase point for you to place and secure the flash hook. You may want to consider twisting and prying on the tool to create a better purchase. This can help to enlarge the opening, making it easier to insert the flash hook into the breech.